They tried to sell my $2,300,000 0-cents ranch while I was burying my father. I got back at 6 a.m. after cutting the funeral short, only to find strangers with clipboards walking my land, a giant for auction sign staked into my yard, and HOA President Karen Whitfield calling 911 to report me for trespassing on property that's been in my family for 3 generations. I never signed up for their HOA. I never gave them a single inch, but they thought I was gone long enough to take everything from me. They picked the worst time and the wrong man. What would you do if your entire legacy was on the auction block while you were 800 miles away grieving? Drop a comment below, because what I did next turned their little fake auction into a full-blown reckoning. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm a third-generation cattle rancher in Colorado. The 47-acre spread I call home has been in my family since 1967, when my grandfather bought raw land and built everything from scratch: the cedar fence, the barn, even the gravel road leading to our front door. After my wife Sarah died from cancer 2 years ago, it's just me and my 16-year-old daughter Emma keeping the legacy alive with our 30 head of cattle. 3 years ago, everything changed when developers built the Maplewood Heights subdivision right next to my property. Within months, they formed an HOA and elected Karen Whitfield as president, a former city planner who moved here from Denver with big ideas about property values and community standards. Karen's the type who measures her neighbor's grass with a ruler and sends violation notices for Christmas lights left up past January 2nd. The trouble started immediately. First, Karen claimed my cedar fence encroached 18 inches onto their common area. Then came the odor complaints about my cattle during summer months. Finally, she decided my gravel road access somehow violated their precious entrance median. Every month brought a new demand, a new threat, a new attempt to force me into compliance with rules I never agreed to follow. Last Tuesday, I got the call every son dreads. My father had a massive heart attack in Montana. I left immediately, planning to stay the full week for funeral arrangements and settling his affairs. Emma stayed with her best friend's family, and my neighbor Bill Hendricks agreed to check on the cattle twice daily. But Thursday evening, Emma sent a text that chilled my blood. "Dad, you need to come home now. Something's happening at the ranch." I drove through the night, arriving just as dawn broke over the front range. The first thing I saw pulling through my gate wasn't the familiar sight of cattle grazing. It was 2 men in expensive suits measuring my fence line with professional equipment. A massive wooden sign dominated my front yard. "Empty now. Maplewood Heights. Homewood Pit. HHO." I parked my truck and walked over, boots crunching on the gravel my grandfather had laid down 50 years ago. "Excuse me, gentlemen, what exactly are you doing on my property?" The taller man barely looked up from his clipboard. "Sir, we're conducting a pre-auction assessment. This property is scheduled for public sale this Saturday." "This is my land," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "You're trespassing." That's when the shorter man made his fatal mistake. He smirked and said, "Sir, we have legal authorization. Please, don't interfere with our work." I pulled out my phone to call the sheriff, but before I could dial, the taller man was already making a call of his own. "We have a situation here," he said into his phone. "Subject is being confrontational." Within minutes, a white Mercedes SUV came screeching up my driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled on my grandfather's fence posts. Out stepped Karen Whitfield herself, dressed like she was headed to a board meeting instead of stealing someone's ranch at dawn. "Mr. Morrison," she said with that fake smile I'd learned to hate, "you're in violation of a court order. These gentlemen have every right to be here." "What court order?" I demanded. "This is my property and I want them gone." Karen's smile vanished as she pulled out her phone. 911? "Yes, I need police immediately. We have a trespasser threatening our legal assessment team." 20 minutes later, Deputy Maria Santos pulled up in her sheriff's cruiser. I knew Maria, her daughter was friends with Emma, and we'd sat together at more than one school event. She stepped out of her car looking genuinely confused about why she'd been called to my ranch. Karen immediately launched into her performance. "Officer, this man is interfering with a legal property assessment. We have full authority to be here under Colorado statute." "Ma'am," Deputy Santos said carefully, "can you show me your documentation?" Karen produced a folder thick with official-looking papers. The top document read, "Notice of Property Forfeiture" in bold letters, signed by something called the Maplewood Heights Community Authority. According to Karen's paperwork, I owed $47,000, 0 cents in accumulated fines and fees for various violations, and my fence encroachment constituted adverse possession in reverse. I stared at the document in disbelief. Maria, I've never seen this before in my life. I never received any official notice. Ignorance of HOA covenants isn't a defense, Mr. Morrison, Karen said smugly. The certified mail was attempted multiple times. Refusal to accept delivery constitutes legal acknowledgement. I never refused any mail, I protested, pulling out my phone to show Deputy Santos my property deed and tax records. This ranch has been in my family for 60 years. Deputy Santos examined both sets of documents, her frown deepening. Ma'am, according to county records, this appears to be Mr. Morrison's property legally. The HOA has statutory authority under Colorado revised statutes, Karen insisted. Mr. Morrison's fence encroachment triggered our abandonment clause. He owes $47,000 in accumulated fines. The numbers hit me like a physical blow. $47,000. For what? A fence that had been standing since before Karen was born? Deputy Santos looked as confused as I felt. This is clearly a civil matter. I can't arrest anyone without an arrest warrant, and I don't see evidence of any criminal activity. Then remove him from HOA property, Karen demanded, pointing at the disputed fence line. Ma'am, I'm standing on my own land, I said firmly. Deputy Santos shook her head. Without a court order or clear evidence of trespassing, I'm not removing anyone. Both parties need to resolve this through the courts. The auction is Saturday, Karen snapped. This delay is costing us thousands in administrative fees. That's when I noticed something that made my blood boil even hotter. The auction sign wasn't just on my property. It was a full 2 feet inside my fence line, planted in soil my family had been working for decades. Karen, that sign is on my property. Remove it now or I will... Touch that sign and I'll have you arrested for vandalism, she threatened. I tried calling my lawyer, Tom Bradley, but got his voicemail saying he was on vacation until Wednesday. 2 other attorneys I contacted had no weekend availability. The timing was perfect, suspiciously perfect. Timing is everything, Mr. Morrison, Karen said with that same smirk. While we argued, the assessors continued measuring my fence line with professional equipment. I retrieved my grandfather's original survey from 1967, yellowed with age but still legally binding. According to the survey, my fence was actually 3 feet inside my property line, nowhere near any encroachment. This survey is outdated, the lead assessor said dismissively. We have an updated survey from 2022 showing clear encroachment. Updated by who? I demanded. I never authorized any survey of my land. The HOA commissioned a professional survey to resolve the boundary dispute, Karen said smoothly. That's when my neighbor Bill Hendricks pulled up in his old Ford pickup, dust trailing behind him like a banner of war. Bill was 73 years old and had been surveying land for the county before he retired. If anyone knew where my fence belonged, it was Bill. Jake, I tried calling you, Bill said, climbing out of his truck with the stiffness of a man who'd worked with his hands his whole life. These people were here yesterday too, measuring and taking pictures. Sir, this is private HOA business, Karen said coldly. Bill laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Lady, I've lived here 40 years. That fence hasn't moved an inch since Jake's grandfather built it. Several neighbors had started emerging from the subdivision, drawn by the commotion. Some looked supportive of Karen, others seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. Mrs. Patterson, whose dog I'd rescued from my cattle pond twice, avoided making eye contact. 2 neighbors I didn't recognize started taking videos with their phones. Please, document everything, Karen told them. We need evidence of his obstruction. That's when Deputy Santos provided the first piece of good news I'd heard all morning. Ma'am, under Colorado law, adverse possession requires 18 years of continuous occupation. If this fence has been here for 58 years, well before your subdivision existed, then Mr. Morrison's original property deed would take precedence over any newer HOA covenants. The legal principle was simple. Prior existing use supersedes subsequent covenant restrictions. My grandfather's fence had legal priority over Karen's power trip. But Karen wasn't backing down. We'll see what the emergency board meeting decides this afternoon. At 2 o'clock sharp, Karen called an emergency HOA board meeting at her house. Despite being the property owner most affected by their decisions, I wasn't invited. I showed up anyway. This is a private meeting, Karen said when I knocked on her front door. You're not an HOA member. I'm the property owner you're trying to steal from, I replied. I have a right to defend myself. The board consisted of 5 people. Karen as president, Dr. Richard Stanton as vice president, Jennifer Walsh as secretary, Marcus Chen as treasurer, and Patricia Vance as member-at-large. What I discovered later was that Jennifer Walsh worked for Karen's real estate company, and Dr. Stanton had invested $50,000 in Karen's business. The fix was in from the start. I presented my evidence methodically, the original 1967 property deed with survey, continuous tax payment records, and my grandfather's handwritten notes documenting the fence installation. These are old documents, Karen dismissed. Current law applies. According to whose survey? I demanded. I never agreed to any survey of my property. Karen produced her professional survey dated March 2022, signed by someone named Robert Kumar from Mountain West Land Services. I'd never heard of either the company or the surveyor. I want to contact this surveyor directly, I said. That's not necessary. This survey is certified, Karen replied quickly. Dr. Stanton read from the HOA covenant. Any encroachment onto common area constitutes abandonment of property rights. According to their interpretation, I had constructively abandoned the disputed strip of land, which then reverted to HOA authority. Jennifer Walsh produced meeting minutes from 2021 claiming I had been properly notified and failed to respond. I had never received any notification about meetings regarding my property. Maybe we should postpone until legal counsel reviews everything, suggested Marcus Chen, the treasurer who looked increasingly uncomfortable. I've already contacted Secure Shield Security for the auction, Karen announced. Given Mr. Morrison's hostile behavior, we need professional security. You're hiring security to help you steal my land? I asked. Patricia Vance, the only board member who seemed to have a conscience, spoke up. Karen, maybe we should reconsider this whole... We're proceeding as planned, Karen cut her off. That's when I learned about Colorado Revised Statute 3833.3116. HOAs cannot claim ownership of property through covenant violations alone. Actual abandonment requires clear intent and physical vacation of property. I had continuously occupied, maintained, and paid taxes on my entire property for decades. The smoking gun came when I demanded to see all correspondence they claimed to have sent me. Karen produced emails sent to jmorrison.ranch@gmail.com, but my actual email was jake.morrison.ranch@gmail.com. They had the wrong address. Typographical errors don't invalidate proper notice, Karen argued. You never verified my contact information, I pointed out. How was that proper notice? Bill Hendricks, who had followed me to the meeting, confirmed he'd never seen any surveyors on my property. I check on Jake's place every day. I would have noticed strangers with measuring equipment. Are you a licensed surveyor, Dr. Stanton? Retired county surveyor, still licensed, Bill replied, and that fence is exactly where it's always been. When the vote came, it was predetermined. Karen, Dr. Stanton, and Jennifer Walsh voted yes to proceed with the auction. Marcus Chen abstained, and Patricia Vance voted no. The motion passed 3-1-1. You're about to make a serious legal error, I warned them. We'll see about that, Karen replied. Sunday morning brought an even bigger shock. Karen was hosting a pre-auction viewing of my property. 3 potential buyers showed up to tour the ranch I'd inherited from my grandfather, led by Karen herself pointing out development potential. I sat on my front porch with my morning coffee, watching strangers walk around my land like they owned it. Every time potential buyers approached the house, I stood up and introduced myself politely. Hi, I'm Jake Morrison. I own this ranch. Are you interested in buying stolen property? The first buyer, a Denver developer in an expensive suit, left immediately after talking to me. The second buyer, a young couple, seemed torn between Karen's sales pitch and my warnings. The third was a real estate investor who started asking Karen detailed questions about title insurance. Ma'am, I'll need to see clear title before I consider bidding, the investor said. Karen struggled to answer his technical questions, finally saying, all legal documentation will be provided at the auction. My neighbor across the street, Tommy Martinez, had been filming everything from his bedroom window. Tommy was 23 years old and ran a YouTube channel called Rural Real Talk with 47,000 subscribers. Jake, this is insane, Tommy said, jogging over with his camera. I'm posting this online. I was initially reluctant, but after seeing Karen's auction flyers posted around the subdivision, I agreed to let Tommy document what was happening. That Sunday evening, Tommy went live on YouTube with the title Insane, HOA Trying to Steal Neighbor's Ranch. The live stream attracted 847 viewers in the first hour, with comments flooding in from across the country supporting my fight. By Monday evening, local news reporter Sarah Kim from Channel 9 had called asking for interviews. When she contacted Karen for comment, Karen initially agreed, then changed her mind. Dr. Stanton refused to speak with reporters entirely. Channel 9 ran the story Monday night. HOA ranch seizure sparks legal questions. Meanwhile, my daughter Emma had been doing research of her own. She discovered that Colorado requires specific permits for property auctions, and no permit had been filed by the Maplewood Heights HOA. "Dad, they don't have legal authority to hold an auction," Emma told me. I called the county clerk's office Tuesday morning and confirmed Emma's research. The clerk explained that Colorado law requires a 30-day advance permit for property auctions, and the permit must include proof of ownership or legal authority. "Sir, they can't legally hold an auction without proper permits," the clerk confirmed. But Karen doubled down on her scheme. She hired Secure Shield security for Auction Day 2.2, armed guards, a patrol car, and traffic barriers. When I confronted the security supervisor, he looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we're just here to maintain order," he said. "What if I told you this property isn't legally theirs to auction?" I asked. The supervisor promised to review their contract with the HOA. All property auctions in Colorado require state-issued permits under revised statute December 14, 401. The permits must include proof of legal ownership or a court order. Unlicensed property auctions constitute fraudulent business practices. Takeaway: always verify auction permits before bidding on any property. The neighborhood was splitting into factions. The Nextdoor app exploded with arguments between pro-Jake and pro-Karen residents. Several neighbors came forward with their own stories of HOA harassment under Karen's leadership. Mrs. Patterson finally spoke up. "Karen tried to fine me $2,000 for planting roses in my front yard." I contacted the Colorado Bar Association for an emergency referral and got the name of Sarah Chen, a property rights attorney who specialized in exactly these kinds of cases. "This sounds like actionable fraud," Sarah told me over the phone. "I can meet with you Wednesday morning." Tuesday night, Karen sent me a certified letter demanding I vacate the property by Friday, claiming continued trespass violated a restraining order I'd never heard of. When I called Sarah Chen's office, her assistant confirmed that no restraining order had been filed in my name. "Mr. Morrison, someone is lying to you about court orders," Sarah said. Wednesday morning's meeting with attorney Sarah Chen changed everything. Sarah was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in property rights cases, and she'd seen enough HOA fraud to recognize it immediately. "Jake, bring me every document you've received from this HOA," she said, spreading papers across her conference table like a detective investigating a crime scene. As Sarah examined the paperwork, her expression grew increasingly grim. Finally, she looked up with a mixture of anger and excitement. "Jake, I don't think this HOA has any legal authority over your property whatsoever." Sarah pulled out the original subdivision plat from 2019, which clearly showed HOA boundaries that excluded my pre-existing ranch property. The developer's agreement specifically stated pre-existing properties retain full autonomy. "Your land was intentionally excluded from HOA jurisdiction," Sarah explained. "They have zero legal authority over your property." The smoking gun came when Sarah discovered that Karen had filed an amended covenant extension in 2021, claiming to extend HOA authority over adjacent properties. But the extension was never approved by the County Planning Commission, and it was never signed by affected property owners. "Jake, this is a fraudulent document. Karen forged your consent." I remembered my grandfather telling stories about negotiating with the original developer back in 2018. Grandpa had been adamant about maintaining independence from any homeowners association. I found his handwritten notes tucked inside the family Bible, detailed records of his meeting with the developer who promised the ranch would never be subject to HOA interference. Sarah made some phone calls and uncovered even more damning evidence. The original developer had sent an email to the county planner stating, "Morrison Ranch property must remain exempt from all HOA authority." The county's planning approval specifically excluded my ranch from HOA jurisdiction. Jake, you have ironclad legal protection, Sarah said. This HOA never had any right to regulate your property. But the fraud went deeper. Sarah contacted the surveyor whose name appeared on Karen's boundary survey, Robert Kumar of Mountain West Land Services. I never surveyed any property from Maplewood Heights HOA, Kumar told Sarah over speakerphone. That signature is forged. Kumar was furious. This is identity theft. I'm filing criminal charges immediately. Sarah's investigation into Karen's business revealed the financial motive behind the fraud. Karen's real estate company had an exclusive listing agreement for my ranch property, which would net her a $140,000, 0 cents commission on a forced sale. Dr. Stanton's wife also worked for Karen's company. This is a criminal conspiracy for financial gain, Sarah concluded. Within hours, Sarah had filed an emergency injunction to stop Saturday's auction and requested a criminal investigation for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. She also filed complaints with the district attorney's office and the state real estate commission. We're not just stopping the auction, Jake. We're ending their entire scheme. Thursday morning, my kitchen transformed into a war room. Sarah Chen spread legal documents across my dining table, while Bill Hendricks, Tommy Martinez, and surveyor Robert Kumar gathered around like generals planning a battle. We have 48 hours to build an airtight case, Sarah announced, pointing to a timeline she'd drawn on my whiteboard. The evidence was overwhelming: my original 1967 property deed, the 2018 developer agreement excluding my ranch, county planning approval with exemption clause, the forged survey with stolen signature, and Karen's real estate listing showing her financial motive. This is the most solid property rights case I've ever seen, Sarah said with satisfaction. We assembled our expert witnesses. Bill, as retired county surveyor who could testify about original boundaries, Robert Kumar, whose signature was forged, retired property attorney Bob Sullivan, who understood HOA law, county clerk Lisa Martinez, who could confirm missing auction permits, and even James Walsh, the original subdivision developer and Jennifer Walsh's ex-husband. Sarah had discovered that Karen never filed a proper lien against my property. Colorado law requires a specific legal process for property liens, and Karen's $47,000 0 cents fine had no legal foundation. You can't just declare someone owes money without due process, Sarah explained. The case was so clear-cut that Sarah contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division. The pattern of fraud, forged documents, identity theft, conspiracy, potentially crossed federal jurisdiction lines. FBI agent Rodriguez agreed to investigate after reviewing our evidence. This appears to be systematic fraud, he confirmed. Tommy coordinated media strategy, reaching out to larger YouTube channels for coverage. The Legal Eagle channel agreed to analyze the case, and local news stations were requesting interviews. Stay factual, stay calm, let the evidence speak, Sarah advised. Meanwhile, the community was mobilizing. A Save Jake's Ranch group formed on Nextdoor, with 127 neighbor signatures supporting me. Mrs. Patterson revealed that Karen had threatened her with a $5,000 0 cents fine for her garden, and 3 other homeowners came forward with similar harassment stories. Emma's research revealed that Karen's real estate company was nearly bankrupt and desperately needed the commission from my ranch sale. The financial motive for fraud became crystal clear. Sarah filed emergency restraining orders against the HOA and coordinated with the sheriff's office to prevent fraud. Tommy planned to live stream the entire confrontation. We turned their auction into their downfall, Sarah said. Under Colorado's Consumer Protection Act, fraudulent real estate practices carry criminal penalties. Identity theft, like forging Kumar's signature, is a federal crime. Conspiracy to commit fraud can result in 5-year sentences. Takeaway? White-collar crime prosecution requires a clear paper trail, and we had one. Our backup plans covered every contingency: emergency injunction to stop the auction legally, sheriff's arrest of Karen for fraud, public exposure destroying Karen's business, or federal charges ending the scheme permanently. We're not just winning, Sarah told me. We're making sure this never happens to anyone else. Thursday evening, I called Emma at her friend's house. Honey, this might get ugly tomorrow. Are you ready? Dad, Grandpa didn't raise quitters. Neither did you. Bill Hendricks clapped me on the shoulder. Jake, your grandfather would be proud. Tomorrow, we restore justice, Sarah said with quiet confidence. That night, Sarah's subpoenas had uncovered Karen's email trail showing premeditation and conspiracy. One email to Dr. Stanton read, "Once we get Morrison's land, we split the profit." His reply, "Are you sure this is legal?" Karen's response, "Legal is what we make it." Tommy's latest video had reached 847,000 views, with 94% positive comments from across America. Stand your ground, Jake. As I sat on my porch that Thursday evening, watching the sunset paint the Front Range purple and gold, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Tomorrow we'd find out what justice looked like. Friday morning brought panic to Karen's camp. When she received Sarah Chen's emergency injunction filing, Karen called an emergency HOA board meeting for 7 a.m., a desperate attempt to move the auction forward. "We need to hold the auction today," Karen told her remaining board members. "Karen, we can't change the auction date now," Dr. Stanton protested. "People have made plans. We can do whatever we want." "I'm the president," Karen snapped. Her own attorney, David Pierce, called with bad news. "Karen, this injunction is serious. You could face criminal charges." "You said the covenant extension was legal," Karen reminded him. "I said it might be legal. This is completely different," Pierce replied, before withdrawing as her attorney effective immediately. Karen frantically tried to cover her tracks, ordering Jennifer Walsh to delete incriminating emails from the HOA's server. "Karen, deleting emails could be obstruction of justice," Jennifer warned. "Jennifer, your job depends on this," Karen threatened. But Jennifer had already forwarded copies of everything to her personal email account. In desperation, Karen offered County Clerk Lisa Martinez $5,000 to backdate an auction permit. "Ma'am, that's attempted bribery," the clerk said, secretly recording the conversation on her phone. The clerk immediately contacted the sheriff's office, which opened a criminal investigation. When Secure Shield Security reviewed the legal documents Sarah had filed, they canceled their contract immediately. "Ma'am, we can't provide security for potentially illegal activities," the supervisor explained. "You're in breach of contract," Karen screamed. "Better than being accessories to fraud," he replied. The HOA board was crumbling. Marcus Chen resigned via email, and Patricia Vance demanded an emergency vote to halt the auction entirely. "Maybe we should postpone this whole thing," Dr. Stanton said, finally showing some sense. "We're past the point of no return," Karen insisted. Jennifer Walsh secretly recorded the entire meeting. Friday afternoon, 3 news vans arrived at the subdivision. Channel 9, Fox 31, and Denver 7 were all running stories about the attempted ranch seizure. Karen refused interviews and hid in her house while Dr. Stanton gave a disastrous interview. "No comment, but we're legally justified," he told Channel 9. "Even if the surveyor says his signature was forged?" the reporter pressed. "What forged signature?" Dr. Stanton stammered, realizing he'd been kept in the dark about key details. Tommy's live stream, Friday evening, peaked at 12,000 viewers, with comments pouring in from across the country. Legal experts in the chat were explaining fraud implications to viewers, and donations were flooding in for my legal defense. "This is bigger than just Jake's ranch now," Tommy told his audience. Friday afternoon, FBI agent Rodriguez interviewed me at the ranch, asking for complete documentation of Karen's scheme. "Mr. Morrison, this appears to be systematic fraud," Agent Rodriguez confirmed. "We're opening a federal investigation." Robert Kumar filed criminal complaints for identity theft, and his attorney threatened a $500,000 zero-cents lawsuit against the dissolved HOA. Kumar agreed to testify Saturday if needed. "I've been a surveyor for 25 years, Kumar told Tommy's camera. "This is the most outrageous fraud I've ever seen. Using email to perpetrate fraud falls under the federal wire fraud statute, crossing federal jurisdiction. Identity theft for financial gain carries mandatory sentencing guidelines. Conspiracy charges can be filed against all participants. Takeaway, federal fraud prosecution has a 95% conviction rate." Friday evening, Maplewood Heights split into warring factions. Pro-Jake signs appeared in 23 yards, while only 7 displayed pro-Karen signs. Several residents posted "Fire Karen" signs, and a civil war was brewing, regardless of the auction outcome. The sheriff's office reviewed all evidence Friday evening and prepared for potential arrests. "Sheriff, this looks like clear fraud," Deputy Santos reported. We'll have units on scene tomorrow, Sheriff Martinez confirmed. Be prepared to make arrests. In a final, desperate move, Karen contacted 3 private investigators to dig up dirt on my family. They found nothing. My record was spotless. Ma'am, this man is a model citizen, the lead investigator told her. Jennifer Walsh provided the FBI with the complete email archive, showing Karen had planned the ranch seizure for 6 months. The emails documented systematic fraud against multiple homeowners, with Dr. Stanton's financial investment in Karen's company clearly showing the conspiracy. I can't be part of this anymore, Jennifer told Agent Rodriguez. Friday night, my ranch house became a gathering point for supporters. Bill Hendricks, Tommy Martinez, Sarah Chen, and a dozen neighbors showed up throughout the evening. Jake, we're ready for tomorrow, Sarah said with quiet confidence. Let's go get my land back, I replied. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, with frost covering the pasture grass that crunched under our boots. By 6 a.m., my supporters had gathered at the ranch. Sarah Chen with her briefcase full of legal ammunition, Bill Hendricks carrying his surveying equipment, Tommy Martinez with professional camera gear, and Robert Kumar with documentation proving his signature had been forged. 23 neighbors from the subdivision joined us, along with 4 news crews setting up cameras. Sheriff's deputies positioned themselves strategically around the property. Whatever happens today, we tell the truth, I told the gathered crowd. At 7 a.m. sharp, Karen arrived in her white Mercedes SUV with Dr. Stanton riding shotgun. Behind them came 2 men in tactical gear from something called Patriot Defense Services, unlicensed security that looked more like intimidation than protection. Jake, those aren't real security, Sarah whispered. They're here to scare people. By 8 a.m., 67 people had gathered at my ranch entrance, a mix of supporters, curious neighbors, potential bidders, and media. Tommy's live stream was broadcasting to 18,000 viewers across the country, with news helicopters circling overhead like mechanical vultures. Karen looked increasingly panicked as the crowd grew, her earlier confidence evaporating in the morning sunlight. At 8:30, Sarah approached Karen with the emergency injunction papers. Ms. Whitfield, you are legally required to halt this auction, Sarah announced loud enough for the cameras to hear. I don't recognize your authority, Karen replied defiantly. This is a court order, not a request, Sarah said calmly. In an act of desperation that sealed her fate, Karen tore up the injunction papers in front of rolling news cameras. Sheriff Martinez arrived with 4 deputies at exactly 9 a.m. He examined Sarah's injunction carefully before addressing Karen directly. Ma'am, this is a valid court order. You need to comply. Sheriff, this man is trespassing on HOA property, Karen insisted. Ma'am, according to county records, this is his property, Sheriff Martinez replied firmly. That's when Robert Kumar stepped forward to confront Karen publicly. Ma'am, you forged my signature on that survey, Kumar announced, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. I don't know what you're talking about, Karen stammered. I'm a licensed surveyor with 25 years of experience, Kumar continued. That's not my signature, and I've never worked for your HOA. The crowd gasped audibly. News cameras zoomed in, and Karen's face went pale as the walls closed in around her. At 9:15, 2 black SUVs pulled up to the ranch entrance. FBI agent Rodriguez and his partner stepped out, their presence transforming the atmosphere from tense to electric. Ms. Whitfield, we need to speak with you about federal fraud charges, Agent Rodriguez announced. I'm busy conducting legal business, Karen replied, her voice cracking. Ma'am, this is about federal fraud charges. Please step over here. Dr. Stanton immediately began backing away from Karen, finally realizing the depth of her criminal behavior. Jennifer Walsh arrived carrying her laptop, walking directly to the FBI agents. I have all the emails showing this was planned for months, Jennifer announced to the stunned crowd. She opened her laptop and showed Agent Rodriguez the email thread where Karen wrote, "Once we get Morrison's land, we're set for life." Jennifer, you're violating attorney-client privilege, Karen screamed. I'm not your attorney, Karen. I'm your victim, Jennifer replied. At 9:45, Karen made her final, desperate play. She climbed onto a makeshift podium and attempted to start the auction without a licensed auctioneer. This auction will proceed as scheduled, Karen shouted. Ma'am, step down. This auction is halted by court order, Sheriff Martinez commanded. You have no authority here, Karen screamed back. That's when Agent Rodriguez produced the federal arrest warrant. Karen Whitfield, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and attempted property theft. This is harassment. I know my rights, Karen shrieked as the handcuffs clicked into place. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Rodriguez said calmly. I suggest you use it. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause that echoed across the valley. Dr. Stanton, seeing Karen in handcuffs, immediately approached Agent Rodriguez. Agent, I want to cooperate fully, Stanton said. Karen told me the survey was legitimate. I invested money, but I didn't know it was fraud. Sir, we'll need a complete statement, Agent Rodriguez replied. The two Patriot Defense Guards, realizing they were about to become accessories to federal crimes, quickly removed their tactical gear and distanced themselves from Karen. Ma'am, we're just here for crowd control, one guard told the sheriff. Gentlemen, you're not licensed for security work in this county, Sheriff Martinez informed them. They left immediately. News crews captured Karen's arrest live, while Tommy's live stream peaked at 47,000 viewers. Comments exploded with support for me in celebration of justice. Channel 9 cut to live coverage. Breaking, HOA president arrested for fraud. Neighbors who had supported Karen began apologizing to me directly. Jake, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Patterson said with tears in her eyes. Karen threatened to fine me if I didn't support her. Mrs. Patterson, you were scared. I understand completely, I replied. Former Karen supporters openly expressed their anger about being deceived and manipulated. Finally, I walked over to the for auction sign that had started this whole nightmare. Sheriff, can I remove this from my property now? I asked. It's your land, Mr. Morrison, Sheriff Martinez said with a slight smile. I grabbed the wooden sign and pulled it out of the ground, soil that had belonged to my family for 60 years. The crowd cheered as I broke the sign over my knee, the crack echoing like a gunshot across the ranch. Sheriff Martinez stepped up onto my front porch steps, his voice carrying across the crowd of 200 people now gathered on my land. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm holding a federal arrest warrant, he announced, the morning air so still you could hear every word echo off the barn walls. He read the charges slowly and clearly. Karen Whitfield is under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and attempted theft of real property. As Agent Rodriguez guided Karen toward the FBI vehicle, she twisted around and screamed at the crowd, "This is my community. I built this place. You're all going to regret this." But the crowd had turned completely. Former supporters were openly expressing their anger at being deceived. "Karen, you lied to all of us," Mrs. Patterson shouted, her voice shaking with emotion. "You tried to fine me $3,000 for my garden shed," added Mike Chen, a homeowner who'd been quiet until now. The pattern was becoming clear. Karen had victimized the entire community with her fraudulent authority. The crowd began chanting, "Lock her up, lock her up." I stepped up onto my front porch steps, the same wooden planks my grandfather had built in 1967. The crowd fell silent, 200 faces looking up at me expectantly. News cameras focused on my face as I spoke into the Channel 9 microphone. "This land belonged to my grandfather, my father, and now me," I said, my voice steady and calm. "It's been in our family for 60 years. I pulled out the original 1967 property deed, yellowed with age but legally bulletproof. This document predates every house in that subdivision," I continued, holding it up for the cameras. "This fence was built before Karen was even born." I paused, looking out over the faces of my neighbors, some who had supported me, others who had been deceived by Karen's lies. "And this ranch will be here long after she's forgotten." The crowd erupted in sustained applause that rolled across the valley like thunder. Sarah Chen stepped up to address the media cluster around us. "Today we proved that property rights still matter in America," she announced. "No HOA, no matter how corrupt, can steal a family's land through forged documents and fraudulent claims." She gestured toward the FBI vehicle where Karen sat, handcuffed in the back seat. Karen Whitfield thought she was above the law. She thought she could intimidate a rancher into giving up his family's legacy. She was wrong. Sarah's voice grew stronger. "This ranch is legally, morally, and rightfully Jake Morrison's. It always has been, and it always will be." Sheriff Martinez addressed the news cameras directly. "This investigation revealed systematic fraud against multiple homeowners in this community," he said. We will be reviewing all HOA actions under Karen Whitfield's leadership over the past 3 years. He looked seriously into the camera. Property owners who believe they were victimized by fraudulent fines or harassment should contact our office immediately. Colorado will not tolerate this type of white-collar crime. FBI agent Rodriguez stepped forward with his own message. Today's arrests send a clear message to anyone considering similar schemes, Agent Rodriguez announced. Using forged documents to steal property is a federal crime with serious consequences. His voice carried the weight of federal authority. We will prosecute anyone who attempts to defraud Colorado homeowners. Property theft schemes will be met with the full force of federal law. Robert Kumar, the surveyor whose signature had been forged, spoke to Channel 9's reporter. My professional reputation was stolen along with my signature, Kumar said, anger evident in his voice. I've never seen such blatant forgery in 25 years of surveying. This fake survey could have destroyed an innocent family. He gestured toward me. Justice was served today, but real damage was done to my profession and this community. In Colorado, property ownership established by chain of title cannot be extinguished by administrative action alone. Original deeds supersede all subsequent covenants when property was excluded from HOA jurisdiction. Forged surveys constitute both state and federal crimes with enhanced penalties. Takeaway: always verify surveyor credentials and demand to see original documentation before accepting any boundary claims. Dr. Stanton, looking pale and shaken, approached me directly in front of the cameras. Jake, I owe you a personal apology, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was deceived by Karen's lies and documentation. I invested money in what I thought was legitimate business. He shook his head in disbelief. I should have verified the legal documents myself instead of trusting her claims. Dr. Stanton announced his immediate resignation from the HOA board. Jennifer Walsh, the former secretary who had blown the whistle on Karen's scheme, addressed the crowd with tears in her eyes. I worked for Karen, but I couldn't stay silent when I realized the scope of her fraud, Jennifer said. She threatened my job if I didn't help with forged documents and fake notifications. She held up her laptop. I saved all the emails proving this was planned for months. Jake Morrison deserves justice, and he got it today. As Karen was loaded into the FBI vehicle, she made one final desperate attempt to maintain her innocence, screaming at me through the car window. This isn't over, Morrison. I'll appeal everything. You haven't won anything. I walked calmly to the FBI car, my boots crunching on the gravel driveway my grandfather had laid down 50 years ago. Agent Rodriguez rolled down the window so Karen could hear me clearly. Karen, I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the silent crowd. This land has been in my family for 60 years. It'll be here for 60 more. I paused, looking directly into her eyes. You won't be. Karen fell silent, finally understanding that her scheme was finished. Tommy Martinez captured the crowd, helping me destroy the auction materials. The For Auction banner was torn down amid cheers, with Tommy live-streaming the banner destruction to 52,000 viewers. Comments flooded in with celebration from across America. Some things are not for sale, I announced to Tommy's camera. Family land is one of them. News photographers captured the perfect image. Me, standing in front of my grandfather's ranch house, American flag flying in the morning breeze, cattle grazing peacefully in the background pasture, with the original fence line clearly visible and unmarked by any encroachment. The caption would read, Colorado rancher defeats HOA land grab. That image became a symbol of property rights victory across the internet. 1 month later, the legal aftermath was swift and decisive. Karen pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges and was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison plus $500,000, 0 cents in restitution to her victims. Dr. Stanton received probation for conspiracy and paid a $50,000, 0 cents fine. Jennifer Walsh was granted immunity for her cooperation with federal investigators. The FBI investigation revealed that Karen had defrauded 17 other homeowners in the subdivision with fake fines and fraudulent enforcement actions. The Maplewood Heights HOA held emergency elections to replace the entire board. Patricia Vance was elected as reform president, and her first official act was issuing a formal written apology to me on behalf of the community. The new board completely rewrote the HOA covenants to prevent future power abuse. fired the corrupt property management company, and established a transparent complaint process with actual due process protections. Robert Kumar won a $750,000 0-cents lawsuit against the dissolved HOA for identity theft and professional defamation. My reputation was restored and my profession was protected, Kumar told the local news. Karen was permanently banned from the real estate industry. 6 months after the auction that never happened, I hosted the first annual Property Rights Victory Festival on my ranch. Over 500 people attended from across Colorado, with live music, barbecue, and speeches about constitutional rights and standing up to corruption. The festival raised $47,000, 0 cents, for a legal defense fund to help other homeowners fight HOA abuse, the exact amount Karen had claimed I owed in fraudulent fines. This land brought our community together, I told the crowd as the sun set over the Front Range. Sometimes it takes a crisis to remind us what really matters. Tommy's YouTube series about the ranch seizure reached 2.7 million total views, making HOA Karen vs. City Colorado rancher an internet sensation. Tommy started a new channel called Know Your Property Rights that became a resource for homeowners facing similar harassment. The video series is now used in law schools as a case study in white-collar fraud prosecution. Mrs. Patterson brings me homemade apple pie every Sunday, and Mike Chen helps me repair sections of fence when needed. Former Karen supporters now volunteer for ranch maintenance projects, and the community that was once divided has healed stronger than before. Karen divided us with lies, Mrs. Patterson told me recently, but truth brought us back together. My daughter Emma wrote her senior project about property rights and constitutional protections. My dad taught me that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it, she wrote. I framed the original 1967 property deed and hung it in our living room next to a photo of my grandfather building the fence that started this whole fight. Grandpa's legacy lives on in this land, Emma says whenever she brings friends over to see the ranch. The case Morrison v. Maplewood Heights is now cited in Colorado property rights legislation and taught in law schools as an example of HOA fraud prosecution. Sarah Chen speaks at property rights conferences nationwide, using our case to help other attorneys recognize and prosecute similar schemes. Federal sentencing guidelines now include enhanced penalties for property fraud targeting vulnerable homeowners. Conspiracy convictions allow prosecution of all participants in fraudulent schemes. Restitution requirements ensure victims receive compensation for damages. Takeaway: white-collar crime prosecution serves as a powerful deterrent to future fraud schemes. Every evening, I sit on my front porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. My cattle graze peacefully in pastures that have known 3 generations of Morrison care. There's no HOA interference, no legal threats, no harassment. Just the peace that comes from knowing you fought for what's right and won. The original fence line remains exactly where my grandfather built it in 1967, a testament to the principle that some things can't be bought, sold, or stolen through corruption. This was never about me versus them, I told Tommy's camera one last time. It was about right versus wrong. It was about protecting what matters, family, property, and the principle that in America, you can't steal a man's land with forged papers and fake authority. I looked directly into the camera. Property rights matter because families matter, and some things are worth fighting for. The camera panned across my ranch at golden hour, American flag waving in the evening breeze, screen door creaking as I headed inside for dinner, the distant sound of cattle settling down for the night. Text appeared on screen: Jake Morrison still lives on his family's ranch. Karen Whitfield is serving her sentence in federal prison. The Maplewood Heights HOA became a model of transparency and accountability. Property values actually increased under honest leadership, and I occasionally attend HOA meetings as a respected neighbor and reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. Their new motto, displayed on a sign at the subdivision entrance, reads, "Community through respect, not coercion." The case is now taught in business ethics courses and used by HOA management companies as fraud prevention training. The Colorado Attorney General created a property rights hotline partly because of our case, and Jake's story has prevented dozens of similar fraud attempts statewide. But the most important victory wasn't legal, it was personal. Emma will inherit this ranch knowing that her family stood up to corruption and won. She'll pass down the story to her children about the grandfather who built the fence, the father who defended it, and the community that learned the difference between legitimate authority and fraudulent power. If you're facing HOA harassment, document everything, I said in my final message to Tommy's viewers. Know your property rights. They can't take what's legally yours. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. I paused, looking out over the land that will always be home. And remember, this is America. Property rights matter, family legacy matters, and sometimes, when you stand your ground, the whole world stands with you. As the video ended, I walked the fence line my grandfather built, running my hand along cedar posts that had weathered 60 Colorado winters. I looked out over land that would pass to Emma, then to her children, protected forever from the kind of corruption we'd defeated. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky the colors of victory, and I headed home to the ranch that would always be ours. Some victories are worth the fight.